Dry Creek had always been a lonely stretch of wilderness, a narrow path carved between sun-baked cliffs and thorny brush. Elena and Eli Ward knew the trail well. They had ridden it dozens of times to deliver medicine to outlying ranches, but on this particular evening, the land felt different. The air hung heavier, the silence deeper, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. They had just finished delivering a bundle of fever tinctures to an old homesteader who lived miles off the road. With the sun lowering behind them in a blaze of copper and red, the twins urged their horses into a steady trot toward Hollow Bend. They hoped to make it back before nightfall, before the coyotes started their restless howling. But halfway through the ravine, Eli's horse snorted and jerked its head. Elena slowed her own mount. "Something's wrong," Eli murmured. He didn't need to say more. A split second later, the crack of a rifle shot ricocheted off the canyon walls. The twins barely ducked before a bullet whistled past Eli's hat, sending it tumbling into the dust. Both horses reared, panicked, forcing the twins to leap off to avoid being thrown. From behind the rocks and shadows, 5 rough-looking men emerged wearing the jagged insignia of the Vipers, a notorious gang feared across 3 counties. Their leader, scar-eyed, broad-shouldered, and grinning like a wolf, stepped forward and tilted his head. "Well now," he drawled, "look what we got here. The Ward twins. Heard you been carrying medicine. Could fetch a nice price. Or maybe we're just bored and need a bit of fun." Elena's heart pounded so violently she felt it in her throat. Eli moved in front of her instinctively, though both knew it would do little good. The Vipers relished cruelty. They enjoyed the fear in their victims' eyes long before they raised their guns. The gang began closing in, boots crunching over gravel. The canyon narrowed behind the twins, no room to run, no place to hide. Elena grasped Eli's arm. "We're not getting out of this, are we?" He didn't answer. Just when the Vipers raised their rifles, a sharp whistle pierced the air clean, controlled, carried by the wind like a warning. The gang paused, startled. A moment later, a lone figure appeared at the ridge above them, silhouetted against the dying sun. A cowboy on a chestnut horse, broad hat pulled low, long coat fluttering in the breeze. Nobody recognized him at first, but the second shot he fired clean, precise, sent the Vipers scattering for cover. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed across the canyon, sparks flying as bullets struck stone. The stranger rode down the ridge fearlessly, cutting across the ravine with the confidence of a man who had taken on worse odds than these. The fight lasted less than a minute. The Vipers, caught off guard and unwilling to suffer more casualties, retreated into the shadows, swearing revenge as they fled. The canyon fell silent again. The cowboy turned his horse toward the twins. Elena tried to speak, but her voice caught. Eli managed, "Thank you, sir." But the man only tipped his hat, eyes unreadable, and said nothing. Then he nudged his horse and rode away, leaving only dust and the name stitched on his saddlebag. Cole Ransom. By the time Elena and Eli Ward reached Hollow Bend, the sky had dipped into deep indigo, and the lanterns lining Main Street flickered like restless fireflies. Their clothes were dust-streaked, their hands trembling, but they were alive and grateful. Word traveled quickly in a small frontier town, so by the time they tied their horses outside Doc Morgan's clinic, a small crowd had already gathered, curious about the commotion the twins stirred up. Eli, still shaken, spoke first. "We were ambushed. By the Vipers." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Hollow Bend had suffered enough trouble from that gang over the years, and even the mention of their name caused unease. Elena continued, "Someone saved us. A cowboy. He came out of nowhere." The townsfolk leaned in, anxious and relieved. Doc Morgan, a graying man with worry permanently etched across his face, asked, "Who was he?" Elena hesitated, then repeated the name she'd seen on the saddlebag. Cole Ransom. The reaction was immediate, like a cold gust of wind sweeping through the crowd. A few people stiffened. Others exchanged uneasy looks. Some backed away as if the name itself carried a curse. The blacksmith, Jeb Carter, spat onto the dirt. "You must have read it wrong." "I didn't," Elena insisted. Jeb's expression hardened. "Then you two were better off letting the vipers take you." A murmur of agreement passed through the gathering. Eli stared, stunned. "What are you all talking about?" "That man risked his life for us." But no one met his gaze. The sheriff, Warren Briggs, pushed his way through the crowd then. A tall, stern man whose badge shone even in the dim light, he approached the twins with caution as if stepping around a rattlesnake. "You saw Cole Ransom," he said quietly. "We did," Elena answered. Sheriff Briggs exhaled sharply, and the tension in his shoulders tightened. "Forget him. Forget the name. Don't speak of him again." "Why?" Eli demanded, his anger beginning to surface. "What did he do that's so terrible?" The sheriff didn't respond immediately. Instead, he scanned the gathering crowd, making sure they were listening. "The past is buried for a reason," he finally said. "Nothing good ever came from Cole Ransom, and nothing ever will." The twins could hardly believe what they were hearing. Elena stepped forward. "He saved our lives. Doesn't that count for something?" The saloon keeper, Miss Tilda, wrung her hands nervously. "You're young. You don't understand. That man carries trouble like a shadow. Death follows him. People disappear when he's around. Whole families suffer." Elena's voice softened. "But that doesn't sound like the man we saw." Doc Morgan shook his head, eyes weary. "Not all devils look like devils, child." It quickly became clear that no amount of reasoning would change the tone of the room. The atmosphere had shifted entirely. Where there had once been concern and sympathy, now there was fear and something else. Guilt, secrets. Elena whispered to her brother, "They're not telling us everything." Eli nodded. "Or anything." The sheriff gave one final warning. "If Cole Ransom saved your lives, be grateful. But don't go looking for him, and don't ask questions." Hollow Ben's better off forgetting he ever existed. But as the twins walked home under the moonlit sky, their thoughts burned hotter than their fear. Someone had lied. Someone had twisted the past. And if the town refused to speak the truth, then they would find it themselves, beginning with the man who saved them. The following morning, Hollow Ben felt different to Elena and Eli Ward, not quieter, but heavier. The townspeople went about their routines as always, but their glances lingered too long. Their whispers followed too closely. Word had spread that the twins had spoken the name no one dared utter, and it had unsettled the town like a storm cloud settling over a dry prairie. Elena sat on the porch, staring at the empty road leading out of town. "He saved us," she muttered, "and they act like we invited the devil to supper." Eli leaned against a post, arms crossed tightly. "They know something, every one of them, and they're afraid we'll dig it up." The twins shared an unspoken understanding. Gratitude wasn't enough. Fear or not, the truth mattered. And so did the man who had risked his life for them. They spent the next hours gathering information, though calling it information was generous. All they found were half-truths, muttered warnings, and shifting eyes. People insisted Cole Ransom had brought ruin years ago, but no one provided details. Doc Morgan claimed he lost too much. Miss Tilda swore he broke the town's spine, and the sheriff refused to discuss him at all. But the more they were told to forget him, the more determined they became. By noon, they packed their saddlebags with water, matches, and a few supplies. The trail they needed lay east, where the mesas rose like ancient guardians. Rumors said Cole wandered that terrain, never staying long, never sleeping in the same place twice. "Are we really doing this?" Elena asked as they mounted their horses. Eli smirked faintly. "We were almost killed yesterday. This seems safer than staying in a town full of secrets." They left Hollow Bend with the sun blazing overhead, following faint signs, a campfire ash pile here, a boot print softened by wind there. Most of the time, They followed instinct rather than evidence. Cole had appeared when they needed him. Now they hoped to return the favor. Hours passed. The desert baked the earth until even the shadows seemed to sweat. But late in the afternoon, as the heat began to fade, Eiley spotted smoke curling behind a jagged outcrop of stone. They approached quietly, dismounting before they stepped into view. There he was. Cole Ransom sat beside a modest fire, sharpening a long hunting knife with slow, deliberate strokes. His horse grazed nearby. His hat brim concealed his eyes, but his entire posture radiated caution bordering on loneliness. Elena cleared her throat. "Mr. Ransom?" Cole's head lifted. His gaze sharpened instantly, the knife stilling in his hand. "You shouldn't be here." Eli stepped forward. "You saved our lives." "We came to thank you." Cole shook his head. "You thanked me by staying alive." "That's enough." "It isn't," Elena argued gently. "The town? They speak about you like you're a ghost that haunts them." For a long moment, Cole stared at the fire as if reading a past only he could see. "Hollow Bend doesn't want the truth," he finally murmured. "They want peace. Even if it's built on lies." Eli exchanged a look with his sister. "Then we want the truth." Cole's jaw tightened. "Go home." "You don't know what you're asking." But Elena didn't back down. "We owe you a debt." Something flickered in Cole's expression, a crack in the armor, too quick to read. But it told the twins one thing. He wasn't just a man with a secret. And now the twins were bound to uncover it. The sun had dipped low by the time Cole Ransom allowed the twins to stay long enough to speak. He invite them to sit. He rarely invited anyone to anything, but he finally stopped sharpening his knife and gave them his full, guarded attention. "If Hollow Bend sent you here," he said, "they're more desperate than I thought." Cole let out a dry, humorless breath. Before Eli could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the mesa canyons. At first it sounded like shifting stones, but it grew sharper, hooves pounding hard. Multiple horses. Fast. Cole stood instantly, every muscle tight. The twins didn't argue. They slipped behind the outcropping as Cole extinguished his fire with a single swipe of his boot. He moved silently, positioning himself with the precision of a man who'd done this far too many times. Moments later, 4 riders emerged from a slit between the cliffs. The snakeskin bandanas over their faces said everything. The same gang that had ambushed the twins, except this time they weren't hiding their intent. Torches flickered in saddlebags. Rifles glinted. Their leader, the same scar-eyed brute from Dry Creek, reined his horse to a stop. His lip curled as he scanned the ground. "I know you're out here, Ransom," he shouted. "We found your camp 2 miles back. You ain't as careful as you think." Cole didn't reveal himself. He stayed still as stone. The leader laughed. "Fine." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, sun-bleached handkerchief. It was from Mrs. O'Hara's ranch. A sweet older widow who baked pies for travelers at the edge of Hollow Bend. The viper waved it cruelly. Eli whispered to his sister, horrified, "They're terrorizing the outlying homes." The leader continued, "You humiliated us at Dry Creek, Ransom. Hurt 2 of my men." He leaned forward, sneering. "The whole town knows. Some folks might even help us if we asked nice enough." The vipers weren't just hunting him. They were using the twins as bait to draw him out. They wanted blood, fear, and chaos. And Hollow Bend, terrified and divided, had no idea how to fight back. "If you want the twins," Cole finally said, stepping into the open like a ghost materializing from dusk, "you'll have to come through me." The vipers jerked in surprise, hands going to their rifles. But Cole raised one hand. "You ain't in any position to give chances. You're alone." "No," Elena said, stepping out beside Cole before he could stop her. "He's not." The vipers stared at the trio, confused, then amused, then furious. Scar Eyes spat into the dirt. "Then you've chosen your graves." He wheeled his horse and galloped off, his men following. dust swirling behind them like war banners. Only when the hoofbeats faded did Cole turn to the twins, his jaw clenched. "You've just made yourselves targets, and Hollow Bend. They won't be far behind." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Then help us stop them." Cole looked away, torn between instinct and duty. But the twins already saw the truth in his eyes. The past he tried to bury was forcing him back into the fight. And this time, the Vipers weren't just after revenge. The Vipers' threat hung in the air long after their hoofbeats faded into the desert. Evening crept across the mesas like a dark tide, swallowing the last of the daylight. Cole Ransom kicked dirt over the remnants of his campfire, his face set in grim determination. "We're going back to Hollow Bend," he said. Elena and Eli exchanged a glance relief mixed with fear. They had expected a fight, but not that he would willingly return to the town that had driven him away. "Why now?" Eli asked. Cole wiped soot from his hands, staring toward the distant horizon where the settlement lay hidden beyond ridges and shadows. "Because the Vipers won't stop with threats. They'll make good on them, and the people of Hollow Bend. They won't stand a chance." He didn't say what they all knew. The town might not want his help. Still, he saddled his horse with the brisk efficiency of a man preparing for war. The twins followed suit, their hands trembling not from fear, but from the realization that everything was about to change. By the time they reached the outskirts of Hollow Bend, night had fully swallowed the land. Lanterns glowed faintly in windows, flickering like fragile beacons. But the streets were too quiet, too still. Cole slowed his horse. "They're coming tonight," Eli frowned. "How can you be sure?" "Because it's how they operate," Cole said flatly. "Strike when fear is highest, when no one's prepared." They rode toward the abandoned rail yard at the edge of town, a place of rusted tracks and forgotten dreams. Years ago, the rail station had been the heart of Hollow Bend's plans for progress. Now it was a graveyard of broken wood and warped steel. Cole stopped at the center of the yard. "This is where it happened," he murmured, voice hollow. "What?" Elena asked gently. He met her eyes, and in them she saw something raw pain long buried. "The Vipers framed me here. Sheriff Briggs's boy rode with them back then. They robbed the supply train, shot 2 men dead, and left evidence to point to me. That's why the town hates you," Eli whispered. "They needed someone to blame," Cole said. "Someone easy. Someone who didn't belong." Before they could respond, a howl split the night air, a whistle blown through clenched teeth, sharp and mocking. Torchlight blossomed at the far edge of the rail yard. The Vipers had arrived. They rode in a wide circle, hemming the trio in like wolves. Scar-Eye dismounted, pulling out a rifle with deliberate menace. "End of the line, Ransom," he called. Cole stepped forward, steady as stone. "You're done terrorizing this town," Scar-Eye sneered. "This town hates you more than they hate us. You're the outlaw. We're just businessmen collecting debts." Elena's voice rang out, strong and fearless. "Your lies won't work anymore. We know what you did." Scar-Eye raised his rifle. "Then you'll die knowing." Gunfire thundered across the yard, sparks erupting from metal rails as bullets ricocheted. The twins ducked behind an old freight wagon. Cole moved like lightning precise, unhesitating, a man who had lived his entire life preparing for this moment. One Viper went down, then another. The fight was brutal, a storm of smoke and steel. Every shot illuminated fragments of Truth Cole's innocence, the Viper's cruelty, the town's ignorance. Finally, Scar-Eye fell, clutching his side, spitting curses as he collapsed into dust. Silence followed, a heavy, staggering silence. The twins emerged, breathing hard but alive. Cole stood over Scar-Eye with a finality that said his past had finally caught up and he had survived it. Behind them, lanterns flickered on as townspeople emerged from hiding. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward, eyes wide with shame as the truth became undeniable. Cole Ransom had never been the villain. He had been the man the town needed all along. When the gunfire faded and the night grew still again, Hollow Bend slowly emerged from its hiding places. Doors creaked open. Lanterns bobbed through the dark like drifting fireflies. Faces once hardened by suspicion now softened with disbelief as they took in the scene. The defeated vipers lying in the dirt, the smoke curling from abandoned rifles, the bullet-pocked rail yard glowing under a swollen moon. And at the center of it all stood Cole Ransom. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired, bone-tired, as though the weight of 10 long years had finally collapsed on his shoulders. The twins approached him first, their boots crunching softly over the gravel. "You saved the town," Eli said quietly, his voice almost reverent. Cole shook his head. "I didn't save anyone. I just stopped what I should have stopped a long time ago." Before the twins could respond, Sheriff Briggs stepped forward from the crowd. His face was pale, etched with guilt that years of denial had carved deeper than any wrinkle of age. "Cole, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what they'd done." "What, my son?" Cole's gaze hardened. "You didn't want to know, Warren." "That's worse." The sheriff flinched as if struck. No one spoke. The crowd watched, silent and humbled. The truth lay naked in the night air. The town had chosen the easy villain, the convenient blame, the man who didn't belong. And Cole had borne that burden alone. Miss Tilda wrung her apron, tears shining in her eyes. "We were wrong about you, all of us," Doc Morgan nodded numbly. "If we'd known, you didn't want to know," Elena echoed firmly, stepping beside Cole. "Because knowing means admitting you abandoned an innocent man." A murmur of shame rippled through the crowd. Cole exhaled slowly, looking at the dirt rather than the faces. "It doesn't matter anymore." But Elena shook her head. "It matters to us," and that was the moment everything shifted. The twins moved to face him fully. Dust streaked their clothes, soot marked their cheeks, but their eyes, steady and bright, held his attention more firmly than fear ever had. "Cole Ransom," Elena said, her voice steady, "you don't owe this town anything. Not their apologies. Not their forgiveness. Not their memories." Eli stepped beside her. Cole frowned, confused. "What truth?" "And you don't have to keep running. Not for them," she tilted her chin toward the trembling townsfolk, "but for yourself. And for us." Cole looked between them, searching their faces for fear, pity, obligation. He found none. What he found instead shook him more deeply than any bullet ever had, the one thing Hollow Bend had never given him. Others simply bowed their heads. The fabric of their lies had unraveled, leaving them exposed in the raw light of truth. "You can build something new here," Elena said softly. "Something real." For a long moment, Cole didn't answer. His hand hovered near his saddle horn, the instinct to ride away like he'd always done, tugging him backward. But then he looked at the twins again, 2 young lives he'd saved, 2 young hearts refusing to let him disappear. And for the first time in years, he felt the weight on his chest loosen. Just enough to breathe. Just enough to hope. "Maybe," he said quietly, "maybe we settle this debt together." And as dawn crept over Hollow Bend, painting the town in gold instead of shadows, Cole Ransom stayed.